You know what separates the truly powerful from everyone else? It's not what they say, it's what they don't say. I learned this the hard way, and today I'm going to share with you the 8 situations where your silence will become your greatest weapon. But before I dive in, let me tell you something that will change your life forever. The person who masters silence masters their destiny. I used to be the guy who had something to say about everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every argument, I was there, mud running, thinking I was proving how smart I was, until one day I realized something that hit me like a lightning bolt. The most successful people I knew, the ones who commanded real respect, they barely spoke. When they did, everyone listened. That's when I understood that words are like money. The more you spend, the less valuable they become. Think about this for a moment. We live in a world where everyone is screaming to be heard. Social media, conversations, meetings, it's all noise. But what if I told you that in this chaos of voices, your silence could be the loudest sound in the room? What if I told you that by choosing when not to speak, you could gain more power than any words could ever give you? The first situation where you must embrace silence is when someone is trying to provoke you. I call this the trap of emotional reaction. Picture this. Someone says something that cuts deep, something designed to make you explode. Your blood boils, your face gets hot, and every fiber of your being wants to fire back with something equally hurtful or defensive. This is the moment where 99% of people fail. They take the bait, they react, they lose. But here's what I discovered. When someone tries to provoke you and you remain silent, something magical happens. First, they don't get the satisfaction they're looking for. They threw their best punch and you didn't even flinch. Second, and this is crucial, your silence makes them question themselves. Did you not hear them? Are you so unbothered that their words mean nothing? This uncertainty is your power while they're trying to figure you out. You've already won. I remember being in a business meeting where a competitor tried to embarrass me in front of potential clients. He brought up a past failure, twisted the story, and painted me as incompetent. The old me would have defended myself, explained the situation, maybe even attacked back. Instead, I looked at him, gave a slight smile, and said nothing. The room went quiet. Everyone was waiting for my response, but I just moved on to the next point of my presentation. By the end of that meeting, I had signed the biggest deal of my career. Why? Because my silence spoke volumes about my confidence and professionalism. The second situation demands your silence when you're in the presence of someone sharing their pain or struggles. This is where most people mess up catastrophically. Someone opens up about their problems, and what do? We immediately jump in with advice, with our own similar stories, with solutions they didn't ask for. We think we're helping, but we're actually stealing their moment. When someone is pouring their heart out, your job isn't to fix them. Your job is to be a witness to their experience. Your silence gives them space to express what they've been holding inside. It tells them without words that their feelings are valid, that they're being heard, that they matter. This kind of silence is a gift that few people know how to give. I learned this lesson when my closest friend was going through a divorce. Every time we met, I had advice, I had strategies, I had similar stories from other people. One day he looked at me and said, "Can you just listen?" That's when it hit me. My words, no matter how well-intentioned, were drowning out what he really needed, someone to simply be there. From that day forward, I practiced the art of silent support. And you know what? Our friendship became deeper than ever before. The third situation where silence becomes your superpower is during negotiations. Whether you're negotiating a salary, a business deal, or even something as simple as the price of a car, the person who speaks first after the offer loses. This is a law as fundamental as gravity in the world of negotiation. Here's why this works. When you make your offer or state your position and then remain silent, you create pressure, not on yourself, but on the other person. They feel compelled to fill the void, and in filling that void, they often reveal information you couldn't have gotten any other way. They might improve their offer, they might show their hand, they might negotiate against themselves, I once sat in a negotiation for a major contract. After stating our price, which was significantly higher than what they expected, I shut my mouth. The silence lasted for what felt like an eternity, probably 45 seconds. The other party started fidgeting. Then they started talking. First, they explained why the price was too high. Then, without me saying a word, they started suggesting ways they could make it work. By the time they finished talking, they had essentially agreed to 90% of what we asked for, all because I knew when to stop talking. The fourth situation is perhaps the most challenging for people in our modern age. When you're surrounded by gossip. We live in a culture that thrives on talking about others. It's entertainment, it's bonding, it's also poison. When you're in a group and the conversation turns to gossip about someone who isn't there, your silence becomes a statement of character. But here's the tricky part. If you speak up against the gossip, you might come across as preachy or holier than thou. If you participate, you become part of the problem. The solution? Strategic silence. Don't contribute, don't laugh, don't nod in agreement, just be quiet. Change the subject when you get the chance. Your silence in these moments builds a reputation that money can't buy, the reputation of someone who can be trusted. I've watched careers get destroyed by gossip. I've seen friendships end and opportunities vanish because someone couldn't keep their mouth shut about others. But I've also seen the opposite. I've seen people rise to incredible heights simply because they were known as the person who never spoke ill of others. When you refuse to participate in gossip through your silence, you become the person everyone trusts with their secrets. You become the safe space in a world full of judgment. The fifth situation where silence serves you is when you're learning something new. We live in an era where everyone wants to appear smart. We interrupt with questions to show we're engaged. We share related experiences to prove we understand. We nod and make sounds of agreement. But all of this noise prevents us from truly absorbing what's being taught. True learning happens in silence. When you're quiet, really quiet, you pick up on nuances that others miss. You hear the things that aren't being said. You notice the body language, the hesitations, the emphasis. You absorb not just the information, but the wisdom behind it. This is why the greatest students are often the quietest ones. They understand that every moment spent talking is a moment not spent learning. It transformed my life when I learned to be silent during learning opportunities. Whether it was in business seminars, personal development workshops, or even casual conversations with successful people, I practiced extreme listening. No interruptions, no clever questions to show off my knowledge, just pure, focused silence. The amount of wisdom I absorbed during these silent periods laid the foundation for everything I've achieved. The sixth situation is when you've accomplished something significant. This might seem counterintuitive. After all, shouldn't you celebrate your wins? Shouldn't you share your success? Yes, but not immediately, and not with everyone. When you achieve something great, and you immediately broadcast it, you dilute its power. You turn your achievement into just another social media post, another humble brag, another piece of noise in an already noisy world. Silence after success serves multiple purposes. First, it allows you to fully experience and internalize your achievement. You get to savor it without the need for external validation. Second, it creates mystery. When people eventually find out about your success, and they will, the fact that you didn't announce it makes it even more impressive. It shows that your achievements are for you, not for applause. I built a multi-million-dollar business, and most people in my life didn't know about it for years, not because I was hiding it, but because I wasn't advertising it. When people eventually found out, their respect for me multiplied. They realized I was the kind of person who did things for the satisfaction of doing them, not for the recognition. This kind of silence builds a different level of credibility. The seventh situation where silence is golden is when you're angry. Anger is like fire. It consumes everything in its path, including the person feeling it. When you speak from anger, you say things you can't take back. You make decisions you regret. You burn bridges that took years to build. But when you choose silence in your anger, you give yourself the greatest gift possible. Silence in anger doesn't mean suppression. It means creating space between the feeling and the response. It means recognizing that your angry words will not achieve what you want them to achieve. They won't make you feel better. They won't solve the problem. They'll only create new problems. Every relationship I've seen destroyed, every opportunity I've watched vanish, every reputation I've witnessed crumble, they all had one thing in common: words spoken in anger. I developed a rule for myself. When I feel anger rising, I go silent for 24 hours. No texts, no emails, no conversations about whatever triggered me. This silence has saved me more times than I can count. It's prevented me from sending that resignation letter I would have regretted. It's stopped me from ending relationships that just needed understanding. It's kept me from making business decisions that would have cost me everything. The eighth and perhaps most important situation for silence is when you need to hear your own inner voice. We live in a world of constant input. From the moment we wake up to the moment we sleep, we're bombarded with other people's thoughts, opinions, and agendas. Social media, news, conversations, entertainment is endless. In this chaos, the most important voice, your own inner wisdom, gets drowned out. This is why the most successful people I know have regular periods of complete silence. Not just quiet, but intentional silence, where they disconnect from all input and simply exist with their thoughts. In these moments of silence, clarity emerges. Solutions to problems appear. The noise of the world fades, and what remains is truth. I practice this kind of silence every morning. Before I check my phone, before I speak to anyone, before I let the world in, I sit in complete silence for at least an hour. In this silence, I've discovered business ideas that have made me millions. I've found solutions to problems that seemed impossible. I've gained clarity on relationships, on purpose, on direction. This silence is where my power regenerates. But here's something crucial about mastering silence that nobody talks about. Silence isn't just about not speaking. True silence is about creating space. Space in your mind, space in your reactions, space in your life. It's about understanding that not every thought needs to be expressed, not every opinion needs to be shared, not every battle needs to be fought. When you master silence, you master yourself. You become the person who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. You become comfortable with being misunderstood because you know your truth doesn't require explanation. You become powerful in ways that transcend words because your presence speaks volumes. Think about the most influential people in history. They weren't the ones who talked the most. They were the ones who knew when to speak and when to remain silent. They understood that words are tools, and like any tool, they're only effective when used at the right time in the right way for the right purpose. Random talking is like swinging a hammer at everything. You might hit a few nails, but you'll destroy a lot more in the process. There's a deeper psychology to why silence is so powerful. When you speak less, people lean in more. When you're selective with your words, each word carries more weight. When you master the art of silence, you become like a deep well. People know that when they draw from you, they'll get something valuable, not just surface-level noise. I've tested this in every area of my life. In business meetings, the less I speak, the more my words impact when I do. In relationships, my silence creates space for deeper connection. In conflicts, my refusal to engage in verbal warfare often resolves issues faster than any argument could. This isn't about being passive or weak. This is about being strategic and strong. Let me share something that will revolutionize how you think about communication. We've been taught that communication is about expressing ourselves, about making sure we're heard and understood, but true communication is about creating understanding, and sometimes the best way to create understanding is through silence. Your silence can communicate confidence, wisdom, strength, compassion, and intelligence in ways your words never could. I've walked into rooms where my silence commanded more respect than any introduction could have given me. I've sat in meetings where my quiet observation led to insights that changed the entire direction of companies. I've been in arguments where my refusal to argue led to the other person solving the problem themselves. This is the paradox of silence. By saying nothing, you often say everything. But mastering silence isn't easy. We're conditioned from birth to fill voids with sound. We're uncomfortable with quiet. We associate silence with awkwardness, with not knowing what to say, with weakness. This conditioning runs so deep that most people will never experience the power of intentional silence. They'll live their entire lives in reaction mode. Speaking before thinking. Responding before understanding. Talking before listening. The journey to mastering silence starts with awareness. Start noticing your urge to speak. Notice how uncomfortable you feel when there's a pause in conversation. Notice how desperately you want to share your opinion, your story, your advice. Then, instead of acting on these urges, pause. Let the silence exist. Let it do its work. You'll be amazed at what happens when you start practicing this. Conversations become richer because you're actually listening instead of waiting for your turn to talk. People start confiding in you more because they sense you're not judging or preparing to give advice. Your presence becomes more powerful because it's not diluted by unnecessary words. I want to address something important here. Some people might think that embracing silence means becoming passive or disconnected. Nothing could be further from the truth. The silence I'm talking about is active, intentional, and powerful. It's the silence of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Not the silence of prey frozen in fear. It's the silence of wisdom, not ignorance. It's the silence of strength, not weakness. When you understand this distinction, everything changes. You realize that your silence is a choice, not a limitation. You understand that by choosing when not to speak, you're exercising the highest form of self-control. You're demonstrating mastery over your impulses, your ego, and your need for validation. This is what separates ordinary people from extraordinary ones. Let's go deeper into each of these situations because understanding them intellectually is one thing, but implementing them is another. When someone is trying to provoke you, the urge to defend yourself is primal. It's rooted in our survival instincts. But we're not living in caves anymore. The threats we face aren't physical, they're psychological. And psychological warfare requires different tactics. Your silence in the face of provocation is like a mirror. It reflects the attacker's energy back at them. They see their own aggression, their own pettiness, their own insecurity, and because you're not giving them the reaction they want, they're forced to confront these aspects of themselves. This is why silence in these situations often leads to the provocateur either escalating to the point of looking foolish or backing down entirely. I'd use this technique in boardrooms where competitors try to undermine me. I'd use it in personal relationships where people try to manipulate me through emotional triggers. Every single time, my silence was more powerful than any words I could have chosen. It communicated that I was above the petty games, that I couldn't be controlled through emotional manipulation, that I was operating on a different level entirely. When it comes to being silent while others share their pain, this is perhaps the most compassionate form of silence. We live in a fix-it culture. Someone shares a problem and we immediately want to solve it. But most of the time, people don't need solutions. They need to be heard. They need to feel that their pain is valid, that their struggles matter, that they're not alone. Your silence in these moments is a sacred space. It's a container where people can pour out their hearts without fear of judgment or unsolicited advice. This kind of listening, this kind of presence is so rare in our world that when you offer it, you become invaluable to the people in your life. You become the person they turn to, not because you have all the answers, but because you have the wisdom to know when answers aren't what's needed. In negotiations, silence is your tactical advantage. Every negotiation has a rhythm, a dance of offers and counteroffers, of positions and concessions. When you introduce strategic silence into this dance, you disrupt the rhythm in your favor. The other party expects you to respond immediately to their offer. When you don't, it creates cognitive dissonance. They start wondering if their offer was too low, if they've reread the situation, if they need to sweeten the deal. I've sat in negotiations where my silence led to the other party increasing their offer 3 times without me saying a word. They literally negotiated against themselves because they couldn't handle the pressure of the silence. This isn't about being manipulative. This is about understanding human psychology and using it ethically to achieve fair outcomes. If your position is reasonable and your silence leads to a better deal, you've simply used a tool that's available to everyone but mastered by few. The silence you maintain around gossip is a testament to your character. In every organization, in every social group, there are people who bond through talking about others. It's an easy way to feel connected, to feel superior, to feel like you're part of the inner circle, but this temporary connection comes at a huge cost. It erodes trust, creates toxic environments, and ultimately limits your growth. When you refuse to participate in gossip, something interesting happens. At first, people might think you're aloof or judgmental, but over time, they realize you're trustworthy. They start sharing real things with you, not just surface-level gossip. They seek your advice on important matters. They recommend you for opportunities because they know you can be trusted. Your silence in the face of gossip becomes your calling card, your reputation, your personal brand. Learning in silence is about humility. It's about recognizing that no matter how much you know, there's always more to learn. It's about understanding that your questions and comments, no matter how insightful you think they are, might be preventing you from receiving the full transmission of knowledge. When you're truly silent while learning, you pick up on subtleties that others miss. You hear the wisdom between the words. You absorb not just information, but understanding. I've sat with masters in various fields, and the most valuable lessons came not from what they said, but from what I observed in silence. The way they moved, the way they thought, the way they approached problems. These things can only be absorbed in quiet observation. Your clever questions might make you feel smart, but your silence makes you wise. Being silent about your successes is about understanding the true nature of achievement. When you achieve something significant and immediately share it with the world, you're seeking external validation. You're saying that your achievement isn't complete until others acknowledge it. But when you can achieve something and be satisfied with your own knowledge of it, you've reached a different level of maturity and self-assurance. This doesn't mean you never share your successes. It means you're selective about when, how, and with whom you share them. It means your sharing comes from a place of contribution, not neediness. When you do eventually share, it's to inspire others or to teach, not to seek approval. This kind of sharing has a completely different energy, and people can feel it. The silence you maintain when angry is perhaps the most practical form of wisdom. Anger clouds judgment. It narrows perspective. It makes smart people do stupid things. When you speak from anger, you're not speaking from your highest self. You're speaking from a triggered, reactive place that doesn't represent who you really are or what you really want. I've seen people destroy decades-long friendships with words spoken in a moment of anger. I've watched careers end because someone couldn't keep their mouth shut when they were triggered. I've witnessed business partnerships dissolve because partners spoke to each other from places of hurt and rage instead of taking time to cool down and approach issues rationally. Your silence when angry isn't suppression, it's wisdom in action. Creating silence to hear your inner voice is about recognizing that you have an internal guidance system that's always available, but often drowned out by external noise. This inner voice isn't some mystical concept. It's your accumulated wisdom, your intuition, your deeper knowing that emerges when you create space for it. In our noisy world, this inner voice is your competitive advantage. It's your direct line to insights and solutions that others miss because they're too busy consuming and reacting. The practice of regular silence, of creating these spaces in your life, is what separates those who react to life from those who create their lives. In silence, you can hear what you really want, not what you've been programmed to want. You can feel what's truly important to you, not what society says should be important. You can access solutions that come from your unique perspective and experience, not from what you've read or heard from others. As I continue sharing these insights with you, I want you to understand that mastering silence is a journey, not a destination. You won't get it right every time. There will be moments when you speak when you should have remained silent. There will be times when your silence is misinterpreted. There will be situations where finding the balance between speaking and not speaking feels impossible. This is all part of the process. What matters is that you start. What matters is that you begin to see silence not as the absence of something, but as the presence of everything. In silence, there's power. In silence, there's wisdom. In silence, there's connection. In silence, there's clarity. Most importantly, in silence, there's choice. The choice to respond rather than react. The choice to observe rather than judge. The choice to understand. And I want to share with you some advanced strategies for implementing silence in your life. First, start small. Don't try to become a master of silence overnight. Pick one situation from the 8 I've shared and focus on that for a week. Maybe you start with not responding to provocation. Every time someone tries to trigger you this week, practice your silence. Notice what happens. Notice how it feels. Notice the results. Once you've gotten comfortable with one form of silence, add another. Layer these practices until they become second nature. You'll know you're making progress when silence starts to feel more natural than speaking. When your default becomes observation rather than participation. When you find yourself automatically pausing before responding to anything. There's a phenomenon I've observed in people who master silence. They develop what I call presence. When they walk into a room, people notice. Not because they're loud or attention-seeking, but because they carry a different energy. They're centered. They're grounded. They're not trying to prove anything to anyone. This presence is magnetic. It draws people in. It commands respect without demanding it. This presence comes from the confidence that silence builds. When you know you can handle any situation without needing to speak, when you trust your ability to remain centered regardless of what's happening around you, when you've proven to yourself that your power doesn't come from your words but from your being, you carry yourself differently. You move through the world with a quiet confidence that others can sense but can't quite explain.